In 1952, in the town of Luton, Great Britain, a boy named Michael was born into the wealthy Peterson family. Since childhood, Michael had dreamed of becoming a popular and famous person. Time passed and Michael grew up to be a polite and quiet boy. But as a quiet child, Michael also could not control his emotions when he was offended. He often got into fights with other students at his school and did not even hesitate to hit and attack his teachers just because he was scolded.
Sure, like most kids, I got into trouble.
His actions made teachers at his school always come to Michael's house to talk to his mother. But every time the teacher came to his house, Michael's mother always defended her son and refused to talk to the teachers. After graduating from high school, Michael went to work at a restaurant. But after working for 2 weeks, Michael felt that the salary paid by his boss was too small, so he decided to take the money that was in the drawer of the restaurant's cashier's desk. His actions made his house visited again. Only this time, it was the police who came to his house. Seeing his favorite son sought by the police, Michael's mother certainly could not refuse to bring the 2 policemen together with her son, so she immediately invited the 2 police officers to meet her son. The police immediately asked Michael some questions about the missing money in the restaurant. But suddenly Michael, who felt offended, spontaneously beat the policeman. The story then continues in 1974. By this time, Michael was married and had a child. Although known to be savage and very difficult to control, Michael never once hurt his wife. He was even more patient than before. On the other hand, Michael's desire to become a famous person was difficult to realize, of course, because he did not have the ability and talent. Moreover, at the time, his family was struggling financially. This prompted him to commit another theft at a nearby post office using a soft gun. He then managed to get as much as 52 pounds. But because of his actions, Michael was finally arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison by the judge. Meanwhile, his wife, who found out about this, immediately went to the police station and divorced him on the first day of his arrest. But Michael didn't seem to respond to his wife. At the beginning of his sentence, Michael felt that prison was not a scary place. He actually lived his life enjoying the prison facilities, which were more like a luxurious residence. However, over time he became bored. To attract the attention of the people in prison and overcome his desire to fight, Michael then looked for new problems. He then beat up some prison guards while they were working. As a result of his actions, the judge decided to increase his prison sentence by 7 years. So he had to serve 14 years. Even so, Michael's popularity continued to rise because of the incident. His friends and fellow prison inmates encouraged him whenever he caused trouble. Long story short, he became so famous that he had to be transferred to many prisons. Michael had visited 120 different prisons, as none were able to deal with his brutal actions.
I'm someone nobody wants to fuck with, you understand? I'm Charlie Bronson.
Later, the prison put Michael in a mental hospital because he couldn't manage his emotions well. The scene switches to Michael, who is distressed by the situation in the mental hospital. He feels that the place is like hell because no one encourages or supports him every time he commits a crime. This is exacerbated by the unsympathetic nurse who injects him with tranquilizers to stop him rebelling. Here, it can be seen that the nurse used the drug chlorpromazine, which is a type of sedative that functions to overcome psychosis and reduce aggressive behavior so that patients can think clearly. Over the years, the nurses administered medication to Michael according to his mental state. This had an impact on his behavioral patterns, as he was unable to speak and was bedridden. To make a long story short, the nurses thought Michael was able to control his emotions, so they reduced the use of tranquilizers for him. Michael saw this as a good opportunity and started devising tactics to get out of the place. He then killed one of the patients who often insulted him, in the hope of being able to live again in the detention cell.
I deserve to go to prison for what I do.
Michael's wish came true that day. Arriving at the prison, Michael was relegated to a cell. He had to serve prison time alone and separated from his friends for 26 years. This frustrated him, and he then rethought the right way to get out of it. After that, Michael rioted again by destroying the prison facilities. As a result of his actions, he was put under extra tight security by the prison authorities and had to deploy an emergency response team to deal with the problem. In addition, given the amount of damage caused by his actions, Michael was rejected from all prisons in the UK. The scene then switches to Michael becoming famous until Queen Elizabeth, the ruler of England, agrees to release him.
Very funny, boys. It's been a pleasure.
Upon his release, Michael is then picked up by his mother. But when he arrived at his house, Michael looked confused because most of his belongings had disappeared from his room. His mother then explained that their room was not big enough to accommodate the items, so most of the items were not moved from their old house. After staying with his mother for a few days, Michael chose to stay with his uncle, who owned a prostitution business.
Ladies and gentlemen in ladies' attire.
In that place, Michael got to know some of the women who worked for his uncle. One day, Michael visits Paul, a friend and ex-convict who praises his fighting skills. Paul offers Michael to become an illegal fighter. This job required Michael to duel with his opponents for a fantastic income. However, to make it easier for people to recognize Michael, Paul advised his friend to change his name to Charles Bronson, a famous American actor who was famous for his stunts that captivated audiences at the time. He also agreed to the partnership that Paul offered him. The scene then shows Michael, who has changed his name to Bronson, as he begins to fight against his rival. Apparently, having an ideal body posture makes it easy for Bronson to beat his opponents. As a result, he always won every match. Even one of his rivals was willing to give his money to see Bronson fight ferocious dogs. On the other hand, Bronson fell in love with one of his uncle's employees who worked as a prostitute. Bronson, who intended to marry the woman, stole an expensive ring from a jewelry store. However, the woman flatly refused as she already had a boyfriend who was also going to marry her. Shortly afterward, the police arrested and sent Bronson to prison. It was calculated that he had only lived a normal life outside of prison for 69 days. In the early days of his arrival, Bronson seemed fine. However, less than a month later, his desire to fight grew again. Bronson then took the warden in charge of delivering books to his cell hostage. He even locked the prison officer up with him. The warden knew about this and called Bronson, but he asked what the warden could give him to avoid committing another crime. After that, Bronson got a crazy idea. He stripped off all his clothes, then asked the warden who was with him in the cell room to coat his entire body with butter. He did this so that no prison guard could catch him when he escaped from the place. However, his guess was wrong. They beat him up until his face and body were swollen. Even so, Bronson continued to be brutal because, in his view, that was the only way people respected him. Unlike the previous prisons, Bronson and several inmates in this prison received art training, especially painting. They not only hone their painting talents, but also show what they feel during their time in prison. On the other hand, Bronson turned out to have an extraordinary talent that he had never shown. So he could paint so beautifully that even the painting class teacher praised his paintings. Encouraged by the recognition and praise he received, Bronson has since spent most of his time painting. He also did not appear to be as anarchic as before. As such, the tutor promised to show his best work to the warden and the governor. On the day Bronson met with the warden accompanied by his tutor, he was treated unfavorably by the warden, who did not seem to care about the painting and said that he was pleased with Bronson's progress, which was beginning to be consistent for the better. He also hoped that Bronson could maintain what he had started. Although Bronson had tried to do everything well and positively, he always received a disappointing response. Therefore, he assumed that if he wanted to gain recognition, then the only way to do so was to act savagely. The scene again shows Bronson holding his art teacher and then smearing his body with black oil paint. Afterwards, he yells for the warden to come in and ask for a duel.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, you fucking cunt!
The story closes by briefly presenting the profile of Michael Peterson, also known as Charles Bronson. To date, Bronson is still in custody and has a life sentence.